Hello and welcome all. I'm Shalin Agrawal. This is our second panel discussion in our virtually borderless investing series. You can watch our first discussion on Financial Express YouTube channel. Today we discuss about building your investment portfolio, your overseas investment portfolio with ETFs. How to own a lot of stocks, a wide variety of stocks with just a select few funds. We have with us today Pratik Oswal, Head of Passive Investments at Motilal Oswal AMC, Mr. N.K. Purohit, Chief Digital Officer at IIFL Securities, and Vinay Bhardwaj, Co-founder and Co-CEO of Stockholm. Welcome all. Pratik, if we can begin with you, very short answer. Can you build an entire investment portfolio using ETFs?
Yeah, thanks, Shalin, for having me out here. Yes, you can. The short answer is yes, you can. So unlike I would say 2 or 3 years back, where there weren't that many options, today you have ETFs in across all categories. ETFs across equity, international equity, debt as well as gold, and also other asset classes coming. So yes, it is possible.
Mr. Purohit, we'll come to you. What is the case for owning ETFs or buying ETFs vis-a-vis stocks? What are the merits or demerits?
ETF is an instrument which is primarily for first-time investors. So somebody who doesn't know where to invest, when to invest, how to invest. ETF solves this problem. ETF, if you ask me as an investment advisor, is the cheapest form of investment. So ETF, cost of investing in the ETF or cost of managing ETF is less than the direct mutual fund. So we all know that direct mutual fund are cheaper than equity investments, etc., etc. So ETF is the cheapest form of investment. Third and the most important thing about the ETF is you can create a portfolio by investing into ETF. You need not to invest in multiple instruments if you want to create a portfolio. And it is one of the most tax efficient way of investing. When we talk about ETFs, ETFs for a first time investor or a new investor or a seasoned investor gives a way to invest into a particular index, commodity, sector, or a theme. As well as you can also invest into a combination of asset class using an investment ETF. So it's a only investment instrument, okay, which helps me create not only short-term but long-term portfolios.
Sure. Vinay, what do ETFs offer vis-a-vis stocks in terms of ownership of a wide range of stocks in a single instrument? Why should I not select stocks? Why should I go for a bunch of 50 stocks or 100 stocks or 500 stocks in one go?
No, absolutely right. So like NK was like mentioning, ETF as an as an instrument is like managed by and picked by cherry picked by large ETF manufacturers. When you talk about the US marketplace, guys like BlackRock, Vanguard, all these guys, they have a pretty intensive research which they do when they go about creating different ETFs which might be multi-factor, ETFs which might be thematic, ETFs which might be like in classic index ETF to a large extent, right? So there's a lot of research which goes on. People say that it's ETF is like pretty straightforward. You just follow a index and create an ETF. You're done with it. But end of the day, you need to manage it to some extent, and why not give it to someone who understands it much better, and you just go about picking the right ETF for your entire risk appetite or your portfolio to a large extent. So from that perspective, ETFs as a single investment gives you the overall diversity which you're looking at. And like Pratik said, yes, you can create an overall portfolio just based on your bunch of ETF to a large extent. It's like absolutely diversified from that standpoint. So it's much easier than cherry picking 20, 30, 40 different stocks. You need to go into the details of each of those stocks, understand the background about that. You got to research it before you pick that. But with ETF, with the very low expense ratio which it comes up with from a US market perspective, it becomes a lot more easier and a safer bet rather than going and investing in different stocks.
I'll stick with you there for a moment. You said that ETFs offer the diversity of investments in a single instrument, but doesn't that diversity by very nature also affects the returns, overall returns, because there'll be laggards in that bunch, which will drag your overall returns. Last video, we discussed that a significant chunk of US market capitalization is in the top 5 or 6 stocks. Then why should I own 100 or 500 stocks when I can actually pick 5 or 6 stocks and generate a bit of an alpha over the index?
So again, if you look at historically, right? So it's a diversification is a good strategy to have whenever you're looking at building a portfolio, right? And yes, you are right. The top the $1 trillion companies kind of dominate any market. So you take any market, for instance, India, LSE, Nasdaq, wherever you go, there is going to be a bunch of stocks which are going to act as which is going to give you the volume and which has the largest market cap. But end of the day, when you're coming up with an intelligent portfolio, which you want to create it for a long-term perspective, it makes to have diversity in your entire portfolio, right? So even when you look at ETF to a large extent, so you don't need to have a truly diversified ETF, right? You can go a thematic way, right? If you like an electric vehicle theme as a theme which you want to invest in, you can pick an EV based thematic ETF, which some of the larger ETF manufacturers provide these days. You can go as as niche as possible. Even there is an AI based ETFs which are like available. So people create ETFs with different categories, especially when you look at the market such as US. ETF is a much more predominant asset class which any investor would like to have.
Prateek, as an Indian AMC, you have a few index funds and ETFs, both S&P 500, Nasdaq 100, the Eurasia Middle East one that was recently launched. Could you walk our audience through what are the different kind of headline index ETFs, or and what do they offer? What are the risk return profiles of such ETFs?
So basically, as the panelist said, there are ETFs now, I think, across categories. So you can buy it across categories. You also have silver as a category coming in next year. So, let's focus on international investing, which I think is a big category. It's growing. It was basically zero, I would say, 2 or 3 years back, and now it's a huge industry. Just by giving you numbers, I think 3 years back or 2.5 years back when I started the international market, so at least the mutual fund space was about 2,500 crore. Today it's about 40,000 crores. So that's a huge jump that has happened in the sort of international investing. So and when it comes to international investing, at least what we believe is to keep things simple, which is why ETFs and index funds, do the job for you. We don't understand markets outside of India as well as we do, understand markets in India. That's one. Number two, if there is a high volatile event or a negative event that happens in the US or sort of somewhere else in the world, we may not be as able to handle that volatility as we are, for Indian markets. So which is why we think, when it comes to international, keep it super simple. In terms of what's available, the most popular one today is a Nasdaq fund. So the Nasdaq 100 index is the most popular right now. It's actually the second highest liquid ETF in India after in the equity space. So it's fairly liquid as well, which I think is a big category. So, with investors looking at and buying ETFs, I think obviously most people tend to, go after the cheapest one, which may not be the intelligent option. You should go after the one which is the most liquid, because that's when you'll get the best price. So I think the Nasdaq 100 is obviously a great fund. It gives you access to the top 100 funds, which are listed on the Nasdaq exchange. It's a little bit more tilted towards technology and healthcare and consumers, so sort of growth oriented sectors, which is why it's performed really well in the last 5-10 years. So that's basically extremely sort of popular. The other one that we've launched, and this was not an ETF, this was an index fund, was the S&P 500, which is also, I would say, probably the second most popular international fund in India today. That's, to be honest, the most simplest fund I could ever think of. It's if you're looking at one fund which completes your international allocation basket, this would be that fund. So it's the top 500 companies listed in the US. So fairly simple. It's a large cap fund, and it's been around for almost half a century. And it's now, I would say, the largest fund in the world. So these are the two, I would say, big options that you have in the US. Unfortunately, not a lot of products out there outside the US. So, we want to expand that basket as well. we recently launched a fund, which is again an index fund. So I think where investors can look at the best companies in Europe, UK, and Japan, which is forms of developed markets, and we'll be coming up with the emerging market fund as well over the next couple of months. So these are at least the options that investors have within the ETF and index fund space. I think you also have a Hang Seng fund, which is also there. You also have, I think, a FANG index, which I think is quite popular. I think you also have so a few more sort of funds. Sort of fund houses coming in, but what's extremely important, at least from my perspective, is that index funds tend to be slightly more popular than ETFs. However, that's changing over time. There's a lot more action happening in ETFs because in index funds you don't have to have a demat account. You can set up SIPs very, very simply. And I think also ETFs tend to be not as liquid. Obviously, that has grown a lot in the last 4-5 years. It may not be a problem maybe in 5 or 10 years time. But which is why, at least in the current state of things, I think index funds are slightly more popular. In with a Nasdaq fund, which we have, we also have a fund of funds, which is a wrapper on top of an ETF, which is basically a mutual fund format of the ETF, and that's where I would say maybe 60 to 70% of our assets are. So I think that's just a broad breakdown about what are the sort of options that you have for investors, at least when you're looking at ETFs and index funds when it comes to international investing.
Ms. Purohit, ETFs and index funds, the buying experience, the investing experience of an investor, which one should they go for, and what are the things that one must consider while buying ETFs or index funds in the US?
Actually, if you ask me, ETFs have made investing experience as far as decision making is concerned very simple. So there is not much in terms of what to buy and what not to buy. But yes, one can look at ETFs from right manufacturers. Like if I have an ETF or an index fund from Vanguard versus a new manufacturer, Vanguard would add a value in terms of their experiencing in managing ETFs. Those ETFs will have more liquidity. Second is in ETF investing or any investing, the platform plays the most important role, because nowadays, and especially in the US global equities, the investing happens digitally. So you need a platform which can help you in 4 things. One is discover, execute, track, and manage. So that is why we chose Stockle over other competition, was that Stockle as a platform was superior across all those 4 parameters of investing. So as a digital guy, I rate platforms on these 4 parameters. How discoverability is easy on the platform. Okay, like we are into investing space and we have a huge competition. Okay, we don't provide a ETF or a stock at a differential price than my competition. Okay, the price of Amazon on each and every platform would be almost the same. Okay, so what makes difference in terms of investment is discoverability. What I want, how fast I can get. Discoverability also include contextual information which helps me to take decision. Okay, so when you go on the Stockle platform, A, discoverability is quite simple. B, it also provides you information which is needed to take decision. Here, the most important thing is to keep information contextual but limited. It cannot be overload of information, or the information cannot be less. Okay, and nowadays when we talk about information, it requires blend of expert, facts, and social proofing. So this platform to my investors provide all 3. It provides me facts, it provides me analyst ratings, it also provides me the social sentiment around it. Once I do it, execution is 1 click. Once I execute, I should be able to track my performance, and if I have to manage, I should be able to do it. So in my case, platform plays a great role in terms of choosing the right ETF, investing into it, tracking the performance, and managing it.
I think we'll come back to you once an investor has opened an account. The discoverability happens. Now the investor has in front of them various ETF offerings, S&P 500, Nasdaq 100, even Fund ETF, as you mentioned. There are those ETFs as well. How to decide which one to go for? 500 companies at once or 100 companies at once, the growth-oriented sectors that have done well in the last 5 years. Here I'm talking about what's the outlook for S&P 500 over the next few years, vis-a-vis outlook for, let's say, Nasdaq 100 and other similar companies.
Yeah. So, in terms of, selecting the right fund, first, it's very important to keep into account, your financial goals and also your risk appetite. That those two are extremely important. We always tell investors to, have low expectations. I think the last 10 years have been great for the US, but if you look at the 10 years before that, US did not do well. So last 10 years, I would say, both Nasdaq and S&P has beaten the Nifty, which is why there's a lot of interest into, US companies and all of that. But, in last 20 years, India has hands down beaten all these guys. So in fact, India is the number 2, highest performing country in terms of equity index in the last 25-30 years. So so it's very important to understand that you have to invest in these economies because of diversification, and very rarely do past performing funds or past performing sort of asset classes do well in the future. So I think the whole point about why we're trying to sell this is to diversify our wealth. What we've seen is that the US markets and Indian markets as well as global markets, they all move in different directions. So it adds a layer of diversification where suppose tomorrow India does badly or the US does badly, you have other asset classes in a portfolio to sort of make sure your overall portfolio does not fall by as much. So that is the main reason to why I would say people should invest in international stocks and indexes and funds and all of that. In terms of choosing, as I said, it really depends on the risk profile. So the simplest fund on the planet is the S&P 500 fund. It's a very simple top 500 companies. It gauges the entire large cap universe in one single fund. I think it captures like 80 to 85% of the market. So you're essentially buying the entire US market in one fund. One more reason to why it's simple, if you just have to buy the S&P 500, because it's also a very globally diversified fund. I would say almost half of the revenues of these companies come from outside the US. So you are getting international exposure outside the US through one fund. So I think that's a very simple fund. If investors want to take a slightly more growth sort of oriented fund, then the Nasdaq comes in, where you have a lot more tech oriented index companies. You have a lot more exposure towards these high growth companies which have done phenomenally well over the last 10 years. In fact, the main difference is not the tech versus non-tech, because even S&P has become pretty tech heavy now. The main difference is the fact that Nasdaq does not have any exposure in all these laggards like energy, utilities, even financial services now become a laggard in the US. So I think that is the main difference between these two. I would say 50-50 is a great option if you wanted to have good exposure to the US. It's a growth strategy overall. But yeah, as I said, I think prospects are great. These companies are getting more and more powerful. I do agree there is a lot of concentration risk happening in the top 5, top 10 names, but you're investing for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and indexes do rebalance. In 2000, we had the same concentration. Sometime in the past, you had the same concentration. So the beauty of the index is that 15 years back, the index was very different from what it is today. So you'll always have the top 50, top 500 companies in your portfolio at all times. So I think the index will make sure it gives you that exposure into some of these top names. So I think that's what I would say in terms of choosing between these two.
50-50, you said that's, I think, a good takeaway. 50% in S&P.
Yeah. So a lot of our clients do 50-50, and I think that's a very good strategy to have overall. Because you are having some growth oriented sort of part of your portfolio, and you're also having some portfolio which, to be honest, you can see yourself holding it for like 20, 30, 40 years also. So it's a good mix.
As I understand, Nasdaq 100 fund would be a little more concentrated than S&P 500 fund.
Yes.
Am I right?
That's right. So Nasdaq, I would say the top 10 companies would be like some 55% of the index. So it's fairly concentrated. So I think investors should keep that in mind. Yeah, that's right.
When Nasdaq 100 having more growth-oriented companies which have done well over the last 10, do you think that kind of performance will continue going forward for the next 10 years?
Honestly, I don't know, to be honest. I don't. If you ask me that, so the Nasdaq has delivered, at least in INR terms, close to 27% IRR. And if you ask me if that would continue, I would definitely say no. I think it's a pretty high possibility that that is something which you should not expect. I mean, I keep telling investors, expect 10 to 15% in INR terminologies, and whatever you the benefits you get would be in the form of diversification, low correlation, all of that. Even the dividend yields is higher, is slightly higher than the S&P 500, but overall, I think that's what I would say is to not expect that, because there's a pretty high likelihood that you will be disappointed. Going from $2.5 trillion, which is top five companies, to 5 trillion or 10 trillion is a lot harder than going from 10 billion to 20 billion to 30 billion. So I think, but obviously, I mean, no one really knows the future. But I would say, I think have low expectations, and I think diversification is what you should invest for.
Your thoughts on S&P 500 and Nasdaq outlook for the next 10 years?
No, like Pratik said, right? So we don't know where the markets are going to go, right? Currently, we are on a pretty decent bull run, and it's been running for the last year and a half or so. And the overall outlook to a large extent has been kind of pretty positive, irrespective of whatever COVID news we keep hearing. There is this higher level of participation from the from the retail investors. If I'm right, last few months, the US had the record number of investors investing in the ETF market. So overall, the sentiment for wanting to be part of the capital market, wanting to be part of the growth story, of US or India to a large extent, it's pretty high, right? So people want to do it, and you link that with the macroeconomic situation, like low interest rate, inflation, and all those things put into the equation. It makes a lot more sense for you to park your money in some of these index ETFs and other kind of safer instrument, which gives you a pretty higher yield as compared to what you might get in a fixed deposit to a large extent, right? So from that perspective, I think the overall sentiment is pretty bullish, irrespective of what is happening with COVID. So let's see what happens in the coming few months as to how the market reacts to it. There is going to be certain blips. There is going to be an overall correction, which is bound to happen, right? It happens in any cycle, so to say. So, but irrespective of that, I think the overall trend is pretty bullish at the moment.
And you said safer instruments. In what respect are these safer instruments, and safer compared to what?
So safer instrument, as when you compare it to investing in a direct equity, or when you're doing a speculative play, ETF is a much more safer instrument from that perspective. And like I said, index funds and all those kind of S&P 500 funds and stuff, they are much more safer, right? Because they are tracking an overall index to a large extent. So the volatility of those funds would be a lot more minimal as compared to having a direct ownership into a particular stock or even a crypto these days. So. And having said that, I think people who want to get an exposure into crypto and Bitcoin and stuff, they are like a couple of pretty decent crypto ETFs also, which are like available at the platform, right? I think they had a record inflow of fund. They manage about 1.8 billion dollars. The ProShare. The Bitcoin ETF, which has been listed. So end of the day, like what Pratik and NK and all are like saying is, options are at plenty. Pick the right asset class for your risk appetite. Have a high level macroeconomic view as to how the market is performing, and build your portfolio basis that. That's about it. It's like creating your own IPL team, right? You need to have a couple of swashbuckling opening batsman, and you need to have a Dhoni to save you when something goes out of order. So end of the day, it's just like that. You just need to build a pretty decent portfolio.
Sure. Vinay, what about rupee versus dollar outlook for the next long term? I mean, I'm not asking you short term charts, but over the next 10 years, where is the rupee going versus dollar? Because
So
investing
rupee predominantly has been, if you look at it from the last 20, 25 years, and it's been depreciating as opposed to dollars, right? So I think, I'm not an expert in economics and the macro scenario in respect to currency and stuff, but the overall sentiment, I think it is going to depreciate a little bit. I don't foresee that appreciating beyond these levels. I think it will hit somewhere around $80 in the next 10 years to a dollar.
Pratik, rupee versus dollar depreciation or appreciation, should investors consider that while investing in US?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a big plus point when you're looking at. So, when you're buying international fund or an ETF or a stock, whatever it is, you're actually buying two asset classes. One asset class is the underlying stocks, these great companies. The other asset class is the US dollar or whichever currency you're investing. So I think that's a great, at least from an Indian standpoint, last 15, 20 years, we've seen the INR depreciate by, say, between 4 to 5%. To be honest, people do expect this to continue in the future as well. We tend to have high inflation, higher interest rates, all of that. So to keep that parity going, people can expect anywhere between 2 to 4%, going forward every year. This is not gradual, so it's pretty volatile. So you might have years. So last year, for example, the rupee did appreciate. 2013 also appreciated. So I think it's not really like a stable graph. It happens it's quite volatile. But I think over the long term, as you said, investors can expect 2 to 4%, which will add to your returns.
So just to make it clear, if let's say my investment portfolio has returned 10% and rupee has depreciated, let's say 2% or 3%, does that mean that simply my return is 13% now, 10 plus 3?
In rupee terms, yes.
That's right. Plus
in
the
rupee
compounded,
terms, yes.
Yeah. Plus the compounded impact of that also will happen. So I think if you can expect that, yeah. So for example, give you a simple example, the Nasdaq in the US has done about say 21%. If you convert that to INR, it's about 26%. The last 10 years.
Pratik, you spoke about kind of completing your portfolio with a simple instrument S&P 500 and maybe a little bit of concentration in Nasdaq 100, but we still haven't touched the small caps or mid caps, the Russell 1000 and Russell 2000 and Russell 3000. Can you talk about those kind of indices and the ETFs based on those indices?
Yeah, so not available in India, but hopefully I think someone will launch those in India. I think if someone is looking at exposure to mid caps or maybe small caps, or maybe even a total market fund, which is a combination of large, mid, and small, they could look at these indices. What we've seen is that at least in the US is that having exposure to small caps and mid caps hasn't really at least in the past 10 to 15 years hasn't really given you a meaningful reward for the risk you're taking, which is why a lot of people tend to go with the simple S&P 500 fund. In the late sort of 80s and 90s, or even like maybe 20 years back, there was like a very people were big fans of something called a small cap value, which is a I think factor index, which is very popular, but that hasn't worked out. So I think yes, those are also options for investors who want to go there directly, who want to go tie up with Stockholm or IF, or you could go there and buy those stocks or ETFs. Not available in India, but I'm pretty sure those should be available in the next couple of years. The only problem of making those things available in India is it's very at least from an AMC standpoint, it's very logistically difficult for us to manage, say, 1,000 stocks, 2,000 stocks, 3,000 stocks, as opposed to 50 or 100 stocks. Even the S&P 500 is I would say logistically not very straightforward. It's a bit complex. So I think that's the only barrier when it comes to offering these products. But I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get these in the next couple of years to investors. But yes, this is again taking a call on mid and small caps, which currently, to be honest, I haven't really got a lot of demand for. People are pretty happy with the very simple vanilla S&P 500 fund.
Mr. Purohit, what about you? Have you seen interest from your investors or your clients in owning small caps as well, owning 2,000 stocks instead of 500 stocks? And what would your advice be?
If you ask me, it has been almost more than 8 months in our journey advising our customers global stocks. Okay. And it has been a journey. So it started with investment into the FANGs of the world. So people who initially invested, they started with the known organizations like Facebook, Amazon, Citibanks of the world. Okay. And as and when their portfolio matures, they move to ETFs. And then when they move to ETF and are little comfortable investing into ETFs, then they move into sectorial or various, we call it exotic products, wherein exotic ETFs like, I have a person who called me up saying that, hey, there is a great outlook for silver. Okay, and we are a registered intermediary on the Indian Commodity Exchange also. So I said, why don't you buy silver through us? He said, no, I'll buy the silver ETF. And he has done his research in terms of buying which ETF of the silver.
So what I'm asking is, among those exotic products, which ones would you recommend buying for the next 10 years, which can give probably 1 or 2% per year more than the index?
Okay, so I would primarily go for thematic investments, the new themes which are emerging, where you have high potential for growth, like EV, electric vehicles, or there are ETFs on the small caps or the mid caps. And not only, I would not go by the market capitalization, I would rather invest into themes which would result into future. So that is what we recommend.
Vinay, thematic investing good enough for beginners, and how risky is it?
I lost you there for a bit, Shailin.
Thematic investments, thematic ETF investing, such as EVs or the themes that will come up over the next 10 years. Good enough or risky enough? And what are the things to consider there for an investor?
So good enough, yes, it is good enough, right? So when you look at ETF such as like EV and renewable energy, to a large extent, the entire world is going towards that direction, right? So from that perspective, from an overall outlook, it is pretty exciting. But like NK was saying, right, you got to pick what you believe in and what works for you to a large extent, right? So from that perspective, if you believe in renewable energy, if you believe in sustainable energy, you believe that the entire world is going to go EV, and you have a pretty good view about what is going to happen in those space, then I would say yes, go for a EV based ETFs which are like available in the market, right? So you could go that way, or if you don't have an outlook per se, and you just want to have a pretty balanced portfolio, then anything like an index fund, or you can have probably have 3 more global themes as a part of your overall portfolio. That will give you an overall balanced outlook to how you can look at your investment. But end of the day, you got to look at what works for you and what you believe in to a large extent.
That's a very good point, actually. Global themes. Which are those global themes that you would advise to look into?
So global themes, obviously renewable and the EV are like very, very popular. Even the Stockle platform, it's like very, very popular, from an ETF perspective. We have seen a pretty decent traction in crypto. Again, I don't know how the crypto market is going to evolve, with a lot of uncertainties with the crypto bill, which is going to coming in and everything. If people want to get a little bit of a diversification or a little bit of, hands-on crypto in a much more regulated environment, then the crypto, the Bitcoin ETF works to a large extent. And then there are ETFs such as like fuel cells based ETF. They are like ETFs based on AI and robotics. They are like pharmaceutical company based ETF. So there's different. They are like leveraged ETF. They are like 2x 3x leverage ETF. They are like multi-factor ETFs. They are like whole bunch of factor ETFs which are like available. So the it's an ocean out there, and especially when you look at the US market, about I think last 6-7 months, about 22 trillion has been invested in the ETF in the US market. So there is an inherent demand, and people are starting to understand what ETFs are and how they can build a portfolio around ETFs. So from that perspective, I think people need to see what they believe in and create what works for them to a large extent, right? So
Prateek, such thematic investments, such thematic ETFs, how much as part of building a portfolio, how much of my portfolio money I can keep into that?
Yeah. So yeah, thanks. So personally, I think thematics is great. It's a great a way to invest in themes that you have a strong belief on. And I do see that, at least in the US, there's a huge trend towards thematics. Everybody is talking about something called the new economy right now, which is a combination of all these new themes like, electric vehicles, automation, robotics, cloud computing, blockchain. So I think, they sound very fancy, and I think like a lot of companies that are under these sort of funds are pretty much the same. But what I would say, at least in my opinion, is that thematics are great because it's a very easy sell to customers, very sort of attractive to customers, and because especially if you look at past performance. But over the long term, I think themes and sectors will, at least in my opinion, will not work out in the best way. Today, I think even Apple, no one knows if it's a tech company or a retail company or a consumer brand. Amazon is bucketed into retail, but it's also into everything else. Tesla is an electric vehicle company, but the founder calls itself a robotics company. So I think a lot of these the subjectivity around themes is something which we'll have to grapple and really figure out what really fits into what bucket and for what reason. And even having worked with a lot of these index providers, I can tell you that a lot of the things they is cooked up after I think looking at past returns and all of that. So I think overall I think it's a great because it's attracting more capital markets, and these companies or these teams will definitely do really well in the future. In fact, even we will be launching a lot of these next year. But it's just that investors need to be slightly more careful about these themes in terms of you have to be a bit of a timer. So I can give you my own example. There was this when I was managing I think client money, a lot of people looking at thematics. The problem with thematics is that the demand of thematics is actually highest when the prices are the highest, when the valuations are the highest. So I think so if you look at the inflows of thematics versus the performance, most people are talking about electric vehicles, when the valuation of electric vehicles are probably, are very expensive. So just, I think if you're looking at thematics, you need an element of market timing, you need an element of patience. And also I think it's important that you maybe put it as part of your satellite portfolio where we can put say 10 to 15% of your money. But definitely it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I think, thematics is good because it's attracting capital towards industries where we want them to grow in a very big way. So I think overall it's good for the customers, good for the ecosystem. It's just that you have to be slightly careful about, what expectations you have on these thematics, and really be there for the long term. Just don't do it because it sounds cool or it sounds sexy. You should believe in that future and then invest.
10 to 15, 20% of your portfolio can be in thematic satellite portfolio, as you said?
Yeah, I think satellite portfolio, I think it's perfectly fine. Yeah, maybe a small proportion.
Prateek, what about geographical diversification? You said that S&P 500 companies are getting half of their revenues from overseas, countries other than the US, but the fact remains those are US companies. What if I want to invest in a bunch of emerging market companies? Should I do geographical diversification as well in my ETF portfolio?
Yeah, I think it makes, to be honest, if you want to keep things simple, and I'm a big fan of that, then the S&P 500 is good enough. I think you don't have to look at anything else, or even a simple broad-based US fund, whatever it is good enough for your portfolio. But, I think simple is, people are very rarely happy with simple things. So I think, and obviously in terms of making it better, I do think that, you could look at additional sort of markets. What we've seen is that, say, the Europe, UK and Japan, tends that will add a layer of diversification to your portfolio, because when US does not do well or India does not do well, you have a third sort of fund in your portfolio. If you look at a typical US like US based investor, so most of my clients used to have one S&P 500 fund, one say Europe fund, and one emerging market fund, and basically you can cover the entire planet in these 3 or 4 funds. So I think yes, if investors are looking at further sort of opportunities outside the US, then they can look at themes in say Europe, UK, Japan, as well as emerging markets. For example, China is a big theme. It's definitely going to be probably the largest market in the world in the next 10, 15 years time. It's very hard for you to ignore China as an economy. So it makes sense to have some of your portfolio there.
Vinay, your thoughts on having geographical diversification, and what does that do to your portfolio returns over a long period?
So I think Pratik hit the nail on the head, right? So to a large extent, I think he covered it pretty detailed. But at the end of the day, any kind of diversification is good. Over diversification is an issue, so you got to manage your diversification in a much better way. So stuff like your currency risk is like hedged when you have when you invest in other markets. Your geographical, political, socio-political risk is like hedged again, right? So if one market kind of tanks pretty badly for whatever reason, then at least the other market, geographic market where you might have your investments in, balances out to a large extent, right? End of the day, when you construct a portfolio, the reason why you are calling portfolio and selection and everything is to manage your downside in a much more effective manner than get a higher level of upside, right? So that is what the overall investing is all about. How do you protect your downside? So by having geographical diversification, industry diversification, market diversification will help you in managing your downside in a much better manner. To a large extent, right? So again, don't over diversify correctly, understand what you're building, and then that will work to a large extent.
Final word, gentlemen. Outlook for the next 10 years of equity markets, both India and the US.
Like I said, it's going to be pretty interesting times, right? The markets have never seen seen a pandemic like this, right? So it's like evolving as we are going, right? So the markets have never seen it. At the same time, there is a huge influx of the first time retail investors coming across different countries, so it's going to be an interesting time, be it India, be it the US markets to a large extent. It's going to be an interesting time. I think we are going to see some level of yo-yoing, which is going to happen, right? As things progress, because there is market is like driven by sentiments to a large extent. So the moment something about COVID or something comes across, there's going to be a dent, obviously. But nevertheless, because of the huge influx of retail investors and all the the other institutional guys who are like pretty optimistic about the near-term future, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting ride, right? So I don't think anyone would have in this panel or anywhere else would have experienced this kind of a ride. So it's going to be pretty cool. I think you got to have your seatbelts on and just enjoy the ride.
Mr. Purohit, should we advise our audience to keep putting in money in the US markets over the next 10 years, step by step?
Next 10 years will be extremely different for India and US. Okay. Till now, India has almost followed US, but now India over last 1.5 years have become a little more matured market in terms of retail participation. So what has happened in last 18 months is very important for India. The number of Demat accounts which opened primarily for the Indian markets in last 10 years were opened in last 1 year. And what we opened in last 1 year opened in last 4 months. So Indian equity market, the participation of retail investors has increased. What COVID has given to the global markets is to tackle the worst situation which could have happened for the markets. So markets have seen depressions, markets have seen Lehman Brothers, but all those events were primarily geography centered. This is the event which has happened globally. And if you see how markets have behaved with such a global event, tells a lot about the future prospect of the market as far as I am concerned. So my consideration or my thought is that markets will behave more maturely in years to come. We will see a lot of growth in the markets, because what all we have witnessed in last 18 months, we would have never thought of, be as an investor or as fund managers also. So the fear of unknown has gone. And when the fear of unknown grows, and when common people starts believing in your market, there is only one side which the market would go from a long-term perspective is upside. And the wealth or the participation going forward, especially in India, would be more broad-based.
I think, okay, we've got that outlook for the next 10 years is strong. There'll be some yo-yoing in between. You think investors can time the market and should try to do that, or just keep putting in small amounts of money?
I think, I think if you look at history, our genetics is a little bit messy. We can't stay away from speculation. We have this urge to speculate, to play the market and all of that. It comes from our sort of ancestors and for trading and all of that. So I think it's and history has shown that we have enough data right now. There's almost no paper out there, academic research or any sort of financial services company which will tell you that timing works. It actually doesn't work. But I think investors have this urge. So what investors can do is satisfy the urge with a smaller corpus, and then and then if you have a sort of long-term portfolio, make sure maybe 80-90% of your portfolio is there, and believe in compounding. I think compounding is what really is a secret sauce. It's about time. Start invest as early as possible, and obviously if you have an urge to go out there and buy stocks or play on ETFs or whatever it is, I think that's not bad. It's just that maybe you can start off with a small corpus, and then if you do well, then you can increase that over time. So I think that's what I would say. It's a good middle ground, and I think it's sort of which is what like a lot of our investors are anyway sort of slowly digressing towards, which I think is a good way of at least investing, because it's very hard. There's so much short termism right now, and there's so much euphoria right now that it's hard for me to say don't time the markets. Don't do this, don't do that. Do it, but do it with a small corpus.
Those are actually very good takeaways, very useful information. There's a lot more to unpack here, a lot more to cover. Within ETFs, investing itself, probably we'll have those leave that for later discussions. For today, thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for sharing all these insights. I'm pretty sure the investors will take a lot of useful information from here. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Shani.